So welcome everyone. This is Letters to My Former Self. And just to give you a little bit of background about this series, this is a series that has been going on internally in Cheetah House for quite a while. I can't tell you how many times I've heard meditators say, man, I wish I had known this, way back when. I wish I could write a letter to my former self. And so we just thought, well, that would be a great name for, a series. And when people have kind of recovered and they can come back and actually read that letter to their former self, and then kind of let the rest of us kind of hang around and listen and learn all the lessons learned from people who have been through quite an ordeal. So the Letters to My Former Self series has been going on within Cheetah House. We have about 200 members of people who attend Cheetah House support groups. But this is the first time that the Letters of My Former Self has been open to the public, because Mandy is the bravest person to actually allow or offer to tell her story to anyone that shows up. We posted this on Facebook. So I'm amazed by your bravery. One of the reasons why she's brave and why we haven't done this before is that when people report that they have had some kind of meditation related problem, often there's a pretty hostile response. And so we've learned that, it takes a lot of bravery to speak out. So I'm so excited that Mandy is brave enough to do that. And I hope that you can all, appreciate that bravery. And I'm going to turn it over to Mandy.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a beautiful, warm introduction, both from Willoughby and from Dan. Both just been quite important to me in this journey back to wholeness. So I thought, just by way of starting, maybe just because there's been a lot of talking already, just as is with mindfulness, and I am still a mindfulness facilitator and teacher, maybe just before we start, just an opportunity to check in and notice how you are right now. You might like to just get a sense of how you are. Maybe there's some thoughts, or maybe some body sensations, or maybe even some feelings that have arisen. As Willoughby has been talking, as Dan has been talking. And maybe you just need to do something in this moment that can help you be more present. So maybe some of you need to move in a particular way, settle in. Maybe you need a little sip of water. Maybe you need a cup of tea, a blanket. So just, oh, there you go. Dan's got something very special. So there you have whatever soothing object, whatever could help you feel a little more comfortable, then please take a moment and do that. So for me, I'll take a deep exhale as I begin. So very warm welcome. Thank you for being here. This is quite a significant moment, and I'll tell you why. It's 20 years I've been in recovery from codependency, adult child syndrome, addiction. And it's 20 years since I walked into my first MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. I was 33 years old when I walked into my first MBSR. And it's nearly 4 years since the meditation crisis, which was well into me having facilitated quite a few MBSR processes, quite a few mindfulness-based relapse programs. And even despite all of that, I walked myself into a crisis 3 or 4 years ago, pushing too hard to know this thing called awareness. And I also just recently finished writing a book on that. And that was a big step for me to put everything, my life, into a place where people could read and learn from that, I'm hoping. So you would say I'm at kind of a learning edge myself right now. And it's taken me 2 or 3 years to reorientate myself back, to feel grounded and to feel a sense of connection with spirituality, with the God of my understanding. So it's really humble that I'm here. I'm coming from a humble place. I'm not going to say that I know everything. I certainly don't. And if I at any point might say something that doesn't feel resonant with you, then please just to say, I can answer some questions at the end, no problem. So the second part is I'm going to just name some topics that we're going to talk about and some themes, and they might not be known to you, like codependency, like something adult-child syndrome, trauma-informed mindfulness and what that really means. So I'll answer all the questions at the end. I'm definitely going to refer to the retreat story quite a bit so that I can give you an understanding of what actually happened. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about MBSR and Buddhism, compassion, and how difficult compassion can be for shame-based individuals. And then conclude with some of the things that I've learned. But let's start with moving into this retreat story. So part of who I am as a person is wanting to be as ethical as possible when I'm teaching. And so what drove that was to really know this thing called awareness. And so around 2018, beginning of 2018, we had a conference in Marapeng, South Africa, that's north of Joburg. And at that retreat, I was attending, but prior to that, I was going to attend the conference, and then I was going to go to a 30-day silent retreat. So I had done quite a few 10-day retreats, so I thought 30 days should be just fine. But unfortunately, what happened at that retreat was a complete unraveling, and definitely a doorway to old trauma coming rushing back in. And it derailed me. It was more of an existential crisis in that, what do I do now as an MBSR teacher who went away to a conference, went to a retreat and came back, and I'm a supervisor on MBSR programs, come back and have to admit to my colleagues that actually I'm completely dysregulated, fragmented, and have to almost go into therapy. It was really, really tough. Luckily, they received it very gracefully, and I was extremely honest, but I also Googled as I came back, and I'll tell you how I came back. It was not graceful, but I went and I Googled trauma and mindfulness and on retreats, and up popped Willoughby, Britain. Thank goodness. So I reached out to her and joined one of the support groups at Cheetah House. No doubt about it, was the beginning of something profoundly shifting for me and stabilizing and grounding. So I thought what I'll do is just preempt what was happening for me before I went to that retreat, because as I've mentioned, I'm a codependent, I'm an adult child, I'm obsessive by my thinking, compulsive in my doing. So I have an OCD way of being. I'm a perfectionist, and I'm a type A in recovery. And those things, what happened before the retreat, that I was already in relapse and I didn't even realize it, because I had become increasingly frenetic and I wasn't noticing the anxiety. So before the retreat, three things were happening. The first was that I had joined a sort of a long online 3-month retreat. I'm going to try and just keep as anonymous as possible, but a really in-depth process for 3 months online that was immersed in practice of about 4, maybe 5 hours a day of practice, no community around me. So just me and my computer, and then the questions that were coming through from the online retreat day in, day out. And I hadn't realized that this was impacting me quite so significantly. And slowly, I recognized that something was happening in my system. And I thought, you know, this doesn't feel good, but I couldn't figure it out. And so the second part of that equation is around that time, which is around 2018, I had been a cancer survivor from, at 42, I was diagnosed with a sinus cancer, very rare sinus cancer, and had 3 surgeries to first remove the tumor and then remove part of the bone. So that happened in 2018 and in 2012, but in 2018, I had to go for my follow-up appointment. And unfortunately, my doctor that had diagnosed me passed away in an accident 5 years after my diagnosis. So this would have been the first time I was going to a new ENT. And I was very dysregulated. And because they hadn't known the cancer, they really scared me half to death with the kind of cancer. You know, they said, who's my oncologist? Am I going back? This thing can spread. So by the time I got home, I was in such a dysregulated state by the next morning, I had full-blown tinnitus. It triggered a tinnitus in me. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced tinnitus, but it's absolutely awful. It is hell. And I woke up with just a loud craziness in my mind. And this was prior to the retreat. So now we had the online retreat, a long periods of being immersed. Then we had this new cancer doctor. We had the tinnitus. I don't need to tell, there's only one other lady and one other lady. I'm over a certain age, so menopause, think fog brain, think all of it. It was all there. And then deciding on that backdrop, I had also just ended a business partnership. We had a mindful recovery center and we had just ended that partnership. So that was a big loss and a grief for me. Against that backdrop, I attended the conference, and then I decided a 30-day silent retreat would just be perfect after that. I'd written to the retreat master, so I'm going to read a little bit, because I think I've powerfully written about it in the recent thing that I've written, but I think I'm just going to see how it goes just for a little while and see if you can land in my story with me. So as I reflect now, I am stunned that I thought I was able to do it. I was in a very fragile and vulnerable place in my health and navigating the transition into menopause at the same time. I rationalized, which is what I do, that I'd attended some 10-day silent retreats and somehow got through those. So 30 days should be the next step. We've always been taught as MBSR teachers to know this thing called awareness more. So the paradox of life, years spending time going within, only at the critical juncture to go without. So as I arrived at the airport on the day of the retreat, I felt so sad having left my husband, because he's my safe place. I had not been apart from him for more than 10 days since we met. We'd been married for 17 years. So the driver arrived and he was very kind and open-hearted. And he told us that the road was going to be particularly difficult to navigate, because in South Africa, we've got a pothole crisis. Or we wouldn't call it potholes, maybe a little bit bigger than a pothole. So already my alarm was up at the airport, my soothing, my safety. I'd already been at the conference. Now I'm at this strange airport. Now I'm on my way to this retreat, which is a 4-hour drive. I'd been in car accidents and I lost my dad to a car accident. So I was very nervous of driving, especially late at night. So I was definitely starting to trigger into out of window of tolerance. We arrived at the retreat in the dark. And as we arrived, there was already pandemonium going on, because it was said that another couple that had arrived, another 2 people that were coming, had also been in a car accident. So unfortunately, as we came around the corner, just on the way to the retreat, a car flipped over, and that was our worst nightmare. So you can just imagine. So I went to my room and I was assigned to a bunk in the corner. So I didn't stay with all the other people I was assigned to. If you've been in a retreat, you know that sometimes you stay off the retreat. So I was assigned to that, and just to a bunk in the corner. So I say, yeah, I highlight this as later we were told in orientation to watch out for poisonous snakes, especially the puff adder. Bearing in mind a poisonous snake is not too easy to see if you decided to creep into my dark bunk bed. That's where my mind was already going. So my nervous system was rattled and I knew it, and I was trying desperately all my tools to come back, to ground myself, to breathe. My worst fear at that stage, I'd managed with CBT to sort of get the tinnitus down. So I was just thinking, I don't want this to escalate. I've got it, it's manageable. And you know, with tinnitus, the more you try, the louder it gets. So I found my way up the dark path to the small dining hall. We had some soup, which was delicious, and all the participants were there, lovely. And then as I'm sitting there, 2 bats fly in, and I'm not making this up. I don't know if this retreat was just destined to absolutely scare me to death, but bats and me, not friends, have an old childhood memory of bats. And again, climbing up just a little bit, the window of tolerance. So the retreat started in silence, and I was trying to focus on the tinnitus, make sure that I was at ease. My body was sore. We had to be at the venue at 6, as you know, so I had to walk from my venue, a little bit in the dark. And I was really trying as hard as I could. So we meditated most of the day, and we ate at meal times. And at meal times is the sort of time that I felt the most normal, because what I tried to do is volunteer, which is my way to do the dishes, because at least in that sense, something about a normal routine or something about a mindfulness practice that I could just escape into something very soothing for me. That was, I think that kept me going, able to stay in the retreat for longer than I could have. So I volunteered for all the chores, which is part of my nature, doing. At least I was doing something, which was very interesting. And then the other thing that surprised me, I write here, is that I was really triggered by the Buddhist practices themselves. So I had written to the retreat master to say I'm not a Buddhist by religion, and that I'm a mindfulness teacher. And they had assured me it wouldn't be a problem. But what did happen was that when I arrived, I was the only secular sort of with my own belief system there. So I felt this sort of sense of being an imposter right up front, because I was not bowing in the shrine room, and I was sort of positioning myself in the corner so that I didn't feel like I was disrespecting anybody. So I was already trying to, you know, in codependency, it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn as trauma responses. So I was already trying to make myself small and make sure that everybody else was okay around me. It's totally out of my window of tolerance already. I knew it. I say on a lighter note, I didn't know if I was hallucinating or not, but you know, in these retreat centers, you certainly don't have any books. You don't have access to books, so the books are covered. Your phone is not allowed, all of those sorts of things. But in the corner, when I looked up from there was a little statue of Jesus on a cross. I'm almost sure I was hallucinating it because I couldn't imagine what it would be doing there. And I honestly thought, am I hallucinating? But for some reason, it felt quite interesting to experience that. Yeah, and I say, so I just want to speak for a moment the differences between this idea, and I speak here a little bit about as a MBSR teacher, we are encouraged to learn more and more about embodied experience and presence, and more about how we show up as teachers. And I was sent this, so I'm just going to give you a sense as a teacher of this. I was sent this a while back, and I'm not sure if it was part of my program or another program or somewhere I read, but this is what came to me. And so this you can extrapolate out is what MBSR teachers are given. It says here, the quality of any MBSR program depends critically on embodied presence, understanding, and lived experience of the instructor. So what is important is, one, your own training trajectory with Dharma teachers. So I was trying to tick that off. Tick. 2, personal meditation practice. I was really delving into very, very long, deep practices. 3, understanding of the Dharma. I spent 4 years with teachers trying to understand. 4, motivation to do this kind of work in the first place. So we are encouraged to do this, and that's how I ended up doing more and longer and deeper and more in depth, trying to be as ethical as possible in this. So I will allow you to understand that when I started as a teacher at my teacher training, I did not know what the word Dharma meant. I had to go home and look it up. I felt extremely embarrassed. I was at the orientation and they said Dharma and Sangha, and I didn't know what these terms meant. So I thought it was a secular MBSR program. This was the textbook, Full Catastrophe Living, and it's got a lot of medical diagrams in. And I thought, okay, well, that's great. Sure, there's Thich Nhat Hanh as the forward, so definitely rooted in beautiful Eastern philosophies. But I didn't understand the level that I would probably have to try and understand, and it got me into crisis. And I'll tell you why. So if it's for me a sense that I mustn't have a self, that's the practice of Buddhism. So I started sort of going, okay, my first MBSR, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my body sensation. That's a good thing. I can kind of step back. But then I wondered, so who am I? I remember thinking that on my first MBSR. So then who am I? Kind of made me scared for a moment. I felt dysregulated. I thought, okay, don't give it energy. Just know that you're not those things. So then the question was, who am I? The second question, what am I going to do in order to understand who am I? If I'm not Mandy, if I'm not a sense of self, then I'm awareness itself. So what is that? That little thought insinuated in, that was way, way before this crisis. So it sat there and I started exploring that with a deeper and deeper obsessiveness is the only word that I can describe. So I'm lying in the bunk bed come day 4. And I'm starting to feel as if I can't, I had foghorns in my head and I can't sleep. And I'm starting to think, okay, I'm starting to feel like a little bit on the edges of, I feel like I'm losing it. Like that's only I feel groundless. I feel I'm in a void. And all I can remember happened to me was that I regressed into a 6-year-old state. As I was lying there, I couldn't breathe. I was going into full-blown panic. And my heart was beating out of, and there were, the frightening thing is there were 3 other people in the room with me. So one on the bunk bed here, and one in a bed here. So I felt even more panicked. I didn't know, I couldn't do anything. I was completely trapped. So I'll just read how I felt. So by the final night, lying in the dark, wondering if there were snakes under my bed or bats in the corner, baboons barking in the distance, I could no longer bear being there. My heart was beating so loud, I was almost sure it would wake up the other women in the room who seemed to be sailing through this retreat. I felt a failure. I felt a sense of shame. I felt like a 6-year-old trapped and panicked all over again with no one to come and rescue me. So I took an action of kindness and I texted my husband. He said, come home immediately. And he simply and tenderly, he just supported me. But I say, I don't wish to criticize the retreat leaders because I really do believe their intentions are pure and they are good people. But to date, after alerting them that I was not coping, because I had gone that afternoon, I was dysregulated, I was tearful. Through all of that, not once have they reached out. Even when I left the retreat that morning, I didn't tell anyone. I just packed my bags. I couldn't get out there fast enough. The guy that was driving me, thank goodness for him, because he said to me, I want to tell you, Mandy, you're not the first person I'm coming to rescue. So that made me feel a lot better. He was so kind, so kind. And so, yeah, it's unusual for me that I could have died in a car accident. I could be dead now. You know, it's to date, I have not received an email, and that's okay. I mean, but what it has said to me is that me as an MBSR teacher, or me as a teacher of this practice, if I do pre-courses, or even if there is a problem during a course, I make sure that I follow up not only the next morning, but late in the evening. I make sure that I look after the people that I'm entrusted with, because I think it's critical as part of being a MBSR teacher. So that's a little bit about the retreat story. So when I came back, I'm just going to put that away so I can just talk to you guys now. So I came back and I was completely dysregulated. I no longer wanted to teach mindfulness, and I never wanted anything to do with Buddhism. I was absolutely traumatized with Buddhism. That shocked me the most, if I'm honest. Because I'd learned a lot from Buddhist psychology. I'd read every book under the sun. I'm a committed person. I really want to know something. And I think that got me into crisis, but I was really just so sort of averse to it. I ended up taking all those books and just giving them away. I didn't want anything in my house. I just felt like I can't have this near me. And I certainly never wanted to, it scared me so much then, this idea of no self, no problem, you know, this sort of thing that gets bandied about, you know. I so desperately wanted to come back to an integrated self. I wanted this self. I wanted to know her. She matters to me, especially in recovery terms, you know, in codependency, that to thy own self be true. So in terms of just that aspect of the practice and recovery, they're in complete conflict, actually. They're in complete conflict. So I came back and I thought, okay, what do I do? And I've always been guided by something a little bit bigger than me. And I decided to go back into therapy. I was actually working in an office block, and at the end, there was a very good therapist, very kind woman. I asked her if I could come back into treatment. I'd explained to her what had happened, and she said, let's do it. And I spent 2 years there and 2 years in Cheetah House. But what was fascinating about the experience of the therapy, we went quite deep, because it wasn't about me having to sort of navigate the trauma of my childhood that I'd done, and I could quite easily come back into regulation. What we had to work around was the existential crisis that I wanted to press the switch on this whole thing called mindfulness. I just wanted it to stop. I just wanted nothing to do with it. It was so And she actually was incredible, because she said to me, you know, everything you've been through, all of these experiences, including making meaning of this thing. And the more I started making meaning, the more it became meaningful for me to stay and to support those that potentially I could support in another lens, through another way. And one of the things that I've been an advocate for right at the beginning was trauma-informed, and then David Treleaven that, and Willoughby with her safety toolbox. I think it's called that. The second one that is critical for me is this sort of, how do you bring spirituality into a secular practice and still keep it true to its origins? It's just this whole dilemma. And so she talked me off a ledge, and I'm glad she did. It's culminated in me being, I think, a more humble teacher, and certainly probably a more informed person, human being, about the detrimental effects of shame-based addiction, codependency, which I'm going to segue into now, and adult child syndrome on a practice like mindfulness. And the caution we need to take, certainly to support people that have that kind of trauma, developmental attachment trauma. So just checking in with how you are. It's half an hour in. How am I? Let me take a little glass of water. That went surprisingly well. Lots of nice faces in the in the little boxes. Thank you. So my first contact with MBSR, I came to MBSR completely suicidal, anxious. I just had panic attacks. I was 31, 32, and my mom had just passed away at 29. So my mom was a chronic alcoholic. She has passed when I was 29. And if you want the whole story, it is coming. Not now, but just what I will say is that majority of my life was spent around making sure that she was okay. So codependency, it's really important to understand, is rooted in denial. The way that you can survive is to make sure that you're able to suppress, repress, and dissociate. Those are three important things for codependents. So they are terrified of abandonment. They are afraid of people and authority. So I'll say I am, even as a person in recovery, tend to have addictive tendencies. So obsessive in thinking, compulsive in doing, catastrophizing minds, all or nothing, and definitely shut feelings down, judge themselves very harshly, addicted to fear and excitement. So that's strange, like, But if you grow up in chaos, it's familiar. So you seek it out. Ease, comfort, calm, contentment feels threatening. It's like, something's very wrong. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I need to be heightened, alert. We are approval seekers. We're self-sacrificial. In fact, there's such a beautiful definition here. So one of Cermak actually did a whole book on this, trying to get the codependency as a diagnostic in the as a diagnostic criteria. And he said, power through sacrifice of the self lies at the core of codependence. Power through sacrifice of the self. So just, we're going to put it all together and just see how this all fits. But that's pretty powerful if you think about what's going on there. If that kind of personality structure comes into a mindfulness course, there's going to be some room for some pretty interesting stuff. They're very mistrusting of others. They procrastinate. They're perfectionistic. They love to isolate. So here are some of these things that exist in adult children. We know what suppression is, consciously choosing to forget something. Repression, automatically, unconsciously, this happens. So it suddenly gets sort of lost and hidden. And dissociated is where you can disappear. You're not there because you're afraid that you're going to be destroyed. So you have to leave. The psychological, emotional, mental self has to go somewhere. So I just want to segue again into just, if you can imagine, put yourself in the shoes of this person arriving at a program. And these are the majority of the people that I work with. And you can easily see how, if a program is not trauma sensitive, or a retreat space, if you can imagine someone like this that I'm going to describe to you arriving at a retreat space, it's not hard to imagine that they might get themselves into a little bit of trouble. So there's an inability to know what normal is. So that they've lost it. So deeply inappropriate behavior is almost tolerated with a large degree of sort of acceptance, you know. Difficulty having fun or being spontaneous, or you know, it's almost like you're on guard for being shamed, you know, at any point. You judge yourself without mercy. So this constant comparison, looking around. So you can imagine in a social environment, a retreat space, low self-esteem projected onto others, you know, so everybody's a threat, because it's these sort of disowned aspects of myself. Oh, that person's, my mind's jumping all over, I'm projecting on. Belief others cause and are responsible for my emotions. I'm overreacting to change. So someone says, oh, we're going to meditate, and then we might do a walking meditation, and then they don't do a walking meditation. And it's like, you're betraying me. I'm not trusting you. Like, even if one little word's out, you know, codependents are relentless adults, and they don't like being promises not being kept. Inability to see alternatives, so very impulsive, sense of inadequacy, super responsible, super irresponsible. A lack of self-confidence. We've spoken about denial, but there's denial of fear, there's denial of guilt, hurt, shame, and there's a denial of grief. So if you can imagine going into a retreat space, if you spend the majority of your time doing in order not to feel these feelings, you get into a retreat space, imagine how much doing is under the surface not to feel, because suddenly you don't have your old distractions, which are TV binges, excitement, food, everything's changed. Suddenly you're really getting yourself into trouble. You fear, and you're very resentful of authority figures. So you put them on pedestals, these sort of gurus, and they fall very quickly. And then there's this anger, hurt, which is sort of a projection onto them, like they've let you down. Hypersensitive to criticism. So if someone says to you, and they're doing an inquiry with you or something, and suddenly they've said something that doesn't resonate, and you're too fawning to be able to correct it, then you sit with the shame of it. Rigidity, need to control, confuse, love, and pity. So some pretty interesting adult-child sort of syndrome. So I'm going to read. Here is the person arriving at the retreat. And this is something that I put together. It's sort of a conglomeration of the sorts of people that are sitting with trauma, and especially attachment trauma, developmental trauma, and are shame-based individuals. This is how they would show up, their behavior. So introvert. I'd rather spend time with myself than make an effort to meet other people. I've developed a belief that everyone is out to get me. I would be able to work well in short periods of time, but I become very frustrated and annoyed when I'm not seen or I'm not appreciated. I struggle to motivate myself. I've learned that it only causes me to tire myself out when I'm not appreciated. Trying to, my clients try, they ingratiate themselves, that fawning. Yeah. I regard others with the eye of superiority, not appreciating the individual personalities. I always think that I can do a job better. So, you know, with meditation, you sometimes get that sense that I can do this. I fear competition. I fear failure. I fear rejection. Due to self-induced sense of persecution, I arrive with this sort of despair mentality, this melancholicness, this depth, this heaviness. I always jump the gun. I'm reactive. I'm not an actor in my life. I'm reactive. I have to have routine. It's absolutely so important. And it says here, I know I need to change, but I'm stuck in routine. So this obsessive compulsive personality, and any rupture to that is extremely dysregulating. I'm not able to assert my beliefs on the world or people around me in fear of my ideas being rejected. Anything, even heartfeltness feels like criticism and potential attack. So compassion doesn't come easily to the people that I work with. So just to say, this disease of, I want to come back to how it affected me, but it lives inside the body for a long, long time after leaving a family of origin that was extremely dysfunctional, as was mine. I want to just for a moment, I don't know if any of you know this wonderful sort of compassionate teacher, particularly in the addiction world, called Gabor Mate. I'm sure some of you have heard of him. He's absolutely beautiful, and he speaks 100% to my heart. And he's all about how do we create more soothing, contented ways of being, which more and more is becoming absolutely critical in the way that I work. But another person that I follow and I really appreciate is Paul Gilbert's work, and I know a lot of you will know him with Compassionate Mind, but he said, he is quoted as saying that, I don't know if you know John Bowlby, and he said that some people are extremely frightened and resistant to many forms of positive emotion. And this was really groundbreaking for me. This is when the penny dropped in these last 2-3 years, because had I not had that experience, I wouldn't be able to understand that compassion is so difficult for people to this degree. I always knew it. I've taught MBSR and I recognize people struggle with it. I even had one client in one group just really have a bad reaction to a loving kindness practice. So he said many years ago, he noted in his therapy sessions, this John Bowlby, that kindness activates the attachment system. So that's interesting. So it also activates whatever's in that system. So if we're anxious or we're preoccupied or we're disorganized, that's what gets triggered when there's kindness or compassion shown. So Paul Gilbert talks about we need to detoxify the system so that we are able to experience nourishing emotions. And that will involve grieving, a grieving process. So see if you recognize some of these in your own experience. Frightened of excitement, because then you might lose control. So say, for example, we're talking about practices that involve, and I'm not talking necessarily, but some spaces might be like, let's dance or let's move in a certain way, or, and suddenly you just completely dysregulate and you didn't even realize it, that you're actually frightened of losing control. It's shaming. You're frightened of feeling safe because it's letting your guard down. If I'm happy, something bad will happen. So the minute everyone's, it's a little bit like what I experienced in the retreat for sure, like just sitting down thinking, okay, everything's safe. What now? Something is going to happen. I'm just waiting for it. And then 2 bats flew in. That was nice. So being content, then I'm lazy, or I'm somehow not achieving or missing out. This is being close. If I'm close to someone, then suddenly they might be open to abuse me, or can I trust closeness? My experience says differently as a child. Feelings of compassion and forgiveness are self-indulgent and a sign of weakness. This idea that vulnerability is death, vulnerability is weakness, very much. Feelings of warmth, activation of a deep yearning of grief, overwhelming for the losses of not that sense of love and connection hasn't been there. So I think that's very important. So the way that Paul Gilbert handles it so beautifully, and something that I'm starting to understand more and more of, is that compassion is a motive, and we have to almost be, we have to work at it. It's like tending a garden. And I think maybe that is what's critical in trauma-informed MBSR going forward, is that it's more explicitly incorporated upfront. And I don't know how that's going to happen. I hope I can be part of what happens there. So when kindness or imagery comes up, then we activate the attachment system, memories, aloneness, vulnerable, defense, cortisol, fight, flight. That's exactly what happened to me. Yeah, we're all sitting in the retreat, what should be a space of compassion, care, kindness. Everybody's sitting, they look blissful, they look happy, they look like they all happy to be together. And inside I am screaming scared, petrified, embarrassed, ashamed. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's quite something to have to admit that when you come back with your peers. It's it's I don't think even humbling comes close to describing it. So that is the one experience. I wanted to also, just before I chat a little bit about one of the other topics, I want to just segue into sort of, if you don't mind, just how did I get myself into this trouble? How did I suddenly decide that 30-day silent retreat is what I needed? Why, you know, where was I? What was happening for me? And, you know, I think with codependency, the way I describe it is like, it's almost like a persona, you know, a false self. And then you've got these layers underneath it, you know. But this compulsive way of being, this sort of false self, can also be a mindfulness persona, is also a persona. And so I think that, you know, I've met very well-meaning people that are really wanting to embody this and teach from the heart, absolutely. But definitely that there are levels of blind spot there. There's sort of like something you can pick up. And the one thing when you're working with trauma individuals and when you're working with people that are addicted or codependent adult child, is that they can see right through it. They really can. They can get a sense of it, like because they've spent their whole life constructing that mask, that false self, that adapted self. So they know. So it's almost like, if I think back, it's like all one. We're playing one big game, and I think I just fell off. And I'm glad I did. I skidded and I got a very bad scar. But I kind of fell off the mindfulness persona thing. And I think that's what I hadn't realized, because there's a part of me that is deeply wanting to understand and know, and I really commit to it. But I recognized that it was just another form of codependency. It was just another mask. So there I was. And you know, I say to my clients now, you know, this kind of sitting and kind of this beatific, and that's not what this is. This is the furthest thing from what we are as humans, because it's an innate capacity. We were born with it. It's nothing that we need to learn. You can watch any 2-year-old and they know exactly what mindfulness is. They know how to be present. Just put a little worm on a stick and sit with a 2-year-old. You'll learn more than any 30-day silent retreat about presence and the beauty of presence. So I was reading along in preparation for this, and I was curious around, you know, I am very clear that in order to be trauma informed, I will teach a program that is secular, that is non-pathologizing, that is transformative, and that is totally explicitly immersed in cultivating a soothing system that can hold you through it first, not the other way around. So start there. Otherwise, I don't want to do this practice, and I don't want to teach this practice, because my experience of it, and if I had been in this for 20 years and I've been in recovery for 20 years and this still happened to me, I think it's safe to think that perhaps this could happen to very less experienced people, and perhaps they are derailed to a much greater degree. I feel very lucky for 2 things. One was the therapy, one was Cheetah House, actually 3 things. And then the third was, and I know he won't mind me saying and saying his name, but I'm just wondering. So yeah, I will say, I'm sure you'll be fine. So forgive me. But I met Mark Williams just after on the retreat. And then I came back and he was teaching his new Feeling Tone course, which is absolutely beautiful. And the reason I say he supported me was the teaching, or the program that he's designed has so many trauma adaptations that he took from Willoughby's work. And what he had done is he's made the meditations sort of 5 options. So you can do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or you can do a 3-minute, or you can do a 2-minute, or you can do it sitting down, or you can do it walking, or you can do it lying down, or you could do. And suddenly I thought, wow, you know, this very renowned teacher. And suddenly this practice looks different. It was so exciting for me because I felt safe. I felt very safe. I thought, if I can only do it for 5 minutes, I can only do it for 5 minutes. And then I thought to myself, do I need to go on another retreat? I never want to go on another retreat. I'll go on a safe retreat from Cheetah House, but I'm talking about a retreat where I drive myself off into the middle of nowhere and sit there torturing myself for 10 days with a traumatized nervous system on high alert. I just won't do that to myself ever again. I just don't feel the need to traumatize or re-traumatize myself. And that doesn't mean that I'm not committed to living a life that is honest, because I think that's what mindfulness is. That's all it is. That's all it is for me. It's just honest. So whilst I was reading all of this, John Kabat-Zinn said the intention and approach behind MBSR was not meant to exploit, fragment, or decontextualize the Dharma, but rather to recontextualize it within the frameworks of Western science, medicine, and healthcare. That's what I signed up to teach in the Faculty of Medicine. So then I was reading, when you read an interesting article, then the best people are the ones that write something at the bottom. So I was reading some of the comments, and this gentleman, whose name I won't mention, but he had responded to the article, and then he said something quite interesting. So I'm going to read it here. He said, Buddhist tradition is not necessary for the effective application of any mindfulness meditation. It works not because the meditator holding certain concepts in their mind while practicing, but because there is a real relationship between mental health and the act of directing conscious attention. That was just so clear for me. I felt, oh, that feels clear. And then he said the Buddha did not invent the relationship between conscious attention and mental health. He simply discovered it, which I thought is also lovely. So he discovered it. So as such, the concept is not exclusive property of Buddhism or Buddhists, as much as any more than natural phenomenon, which is lovely, And he just speaks here about meditation being talked about 1961 already by the Foundation of Human Understanding, blah, blah, blah. But John Kabat-Zinn himself also, because I thought to myself, I had immersed myself to such a degree trying to understand Buddhist psychology and understand, cultivate the observer, and then what is awareness. And then, on the one retreat, 10-day retreat, I was 5 days into it, and suddenly I was out of my body, and I was, oh my word, am I having a mystical experience? Am I having what's happening now? And it was encouraged. No, this is amazing. I can't believe this thing happened to you. Meanwhile, I was up there going, I'm terrified. How do I get back into my body? And then when I left that retreat, I had an earworm for 5 days. had this weird music playing over and over and over and over and over. thought I was going mad. And all of these things, I just thought, is this part of it? Is this what they're talking about? And surely this is a good thing. But actually, all of that time, I think there were signs that this was always going to end badly with me. So the sort of deep honoring of that tradition and what it has taught me, and at the same time being able to advocate for myself, and therefore through being able to advocate for myself what is healthy for me, I'm recognized that in anything that I teach going forward, there will never be any sort of religious underpinnings. There will always be a sort of a secular, science-based way of being. And the compassionate part of that, yes, sure, we can embody it, but us teachers can also fall very flat. So if that's only dependent on us and we're still learning how to be compassionate to self, then I think explicitly we need to encourage practices that support soothing and contentment. So let me just go to, just find my little notes on this, 2 seconds. I've got a jolly lot of notes around here, people. Confusing myself. Okay, what have I learned from all of this? Let me find that. Here they are. Thank you for your patience. So, yeah. I'm very cautious in retreat spaces. I don't think I'm going to attend another. And if I do, it's going to be with people that I trust and that I've done my homework on. And I encourage those that are attending to really do their homework, advocate for yourself, really, really, really. I'm going to stay in support groups, and I'm going to stay in supervision and definitely delve into therapeutic if I need to. Trauma-informed non-negotiables, it's just something that I'm educating myself on and have educated more and more. And I need a strong integrated sense of myself. I need to, it's critical. This no self thing doesn't make any sense to me. It makes me feel like I'm not grounded. It scares me. So that won't be something that I need to. And I'm really glad that I don't need to find out what no self is anymore. I'm really glad that I've come back to myself. Yeah, and the pre-course interviews that I do with clients, I make sure that I spend a lot of time with them, and I really give them space to tell me their story and tell me what might derail them and tell me what, I've learned that now. I've learned that myself. I didn't have any pre-course interview for my retreat. And I think it's really important. And I put here, mindfulness persona is still the persona. So authentic and humble. Constant work on humility, which is recovery. That's what recovery is. I've also learned to stay with a person, meet them where they are, not where I am. Or, that sense of going into retreat spaces and looking up at all these people sitting so quietly and still and looking so harsh for me to be in a space like that, because I just don't measure up to that, and it requires so much energy for me to try. Admitting and validating and acknowledging the people in front of me when I'm inquiring, that their experience is valid no matter what it is, and to support them. Bounded attunement, that's me as a teacher, which means I know where my boundaries start and where another starts. So it's really important. Boundary violations can come in things like, can I hug you? Ask these sorts of things. I'm impeccable with my word to the degree that I really, really hold that as a value, because I know that it's important for me. Non-shaming, gentle tone. Gentle tone is important. Eye contact is important. Rank awareness. Rank comes in many different ways. And grace awareness, containment, sensitivity. So yeah, I think those are the things that I've learned from this experience. And I think back now, and when I came back, I had a conversation with my husband and a conversation with my brother. And my husband said to me, Mandy, you were never so tuned in to every little thing in your body, in your mind, in your emotional state. That was not how I remembered you when I met you. It was such an interesting thing for him to say, that I'm so hyper attuned to everything. And when he said that to me when I came back from the retreat, it really knocked me. And I thought, oh my word, I'm going to have to unlearn that and become a little more sort of earthed. I need to earth myself in reality again. I need the birds, I need the trees, I started swimming, I need cold water. I needed to get my focus out. So that's how I did it, like lots of cold water swimming, cold showers, and they call it vagal tone, but it really helped me. Suddenly I had to focus on the breathing. Nothing will allow you to focus on the breath like a cold shower. And you're only allowed to breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. So vagal tone. And then the second, my younger brother, who's also in recovery and an amazing teacher to me, he said to me, Mandy, I really hope you're going to stop running now. We were having some cake when I got back. I was telling him my story of the retreat. And I said, what do you mean running? Like running? What do you mean running? He said, what am I running from? He said, tell me. I said to him, tell me what I'm running from. And he said, contentment. I thought, he is like sometimes the people, your greatest teachers are the one right next to you, and he was absolutely right, because there's a part of me that is content with life, a large part of me. So this striving, this compulsive nature, and the hit of validation and approval that is like a drug, this is the last bit of the recovery. And so they're my two guys, you know, telling me, don't be so tuned in, and you're allowed to be content. It's okay. You've done enough. You are enough. You can stop. That was really healing for me.